The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber stretched high above the assembled delegates. Hundreds of alien species filled the tiered seating, their various forms creating a bizarre rainbow of colors, shapes, and sizes. The air hummed with translated voices as beings from across the galaxy debated the fate of newly discovered worlds. At the center of it all sat the High Council, 12 of the most powerful species in known space. Their elevated platform gave them clear view of everything below, including the human delegation that had arrived just 3 cycles ago. The humans sat quietly in their assigned corner, a small group of 20 individuals who looked painfully ordinary compared to the exotic aliens surrounding them. No massive claws, no shimmering energy fields, no telepathic abilities that made the air shimmer, just soft pink skin, simple clothing, and nervous expressions as they tried to follow conversations in dozens of languages. Ambassador Zekthara of the Vorthak Empire leaned forward in his crystalline chair, his 4 eyes glinting with amusement. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked as he spoke to his fellow council members in their private channel. "Look at them," he transmitted directly into their minds. "They cannot even participate in our discussions. No telepathic abilities, no quantum consciousness, no bioelectric communication arrays. How did such primitive creatures even achieve spaceflight?" Council Prime Zirian, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric frame, pulsed with agreement. "Their application for membership is almost insulting. They claim to represent Earth, yet they bring no unique technologies, no psychic gifts, no evolutionary advantages. What could they possibly offer the Council?" The other Council members shared what passed for laughter among their species. Some clicked, others hummed, and a few simply radiated amusement through pheromones that their biosuits translated into emotional frequencies. Down in the human section, Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of the human delegation, noticed the attention they were receiving. She had spent her entire career studying xenolinguistics, but even with her neural implants and translation devices, she could only catch fragments of the conversation swirling around them. "They're talking about us," whispered Commander Jake Rodriguez, the military attaché assigned to their group. His enhanced hearing picked up more of the audio spectrum than baseline humans, but it still wasn't enough to fully understand the alien discussions. "I know," Sarah replied quietly. "Try to look confident. We knew this wouldn't be easy." What none of them noticed was the figure moving quietly along the edges of the great chamber. Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart with practiced efficiency, emptying waste receptacles and wiping down surfaces that the various alien species had contaminated with their presence. His gray jumpsuit marked him as part of the janitorial staff, invisible to the important beings conducting their galactic business. Marcus had been working in the council chambers for 6 months now, ever since the human delegation had been granted temporary residency, while their membership application was being considered. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and gave him a chance to see history being made, even if he was just cleaning up after it. He moved with the quiet competence of someone who had learned to be unnoticed. The aliens rarely acknowledged the cleaning staff, treating them like mobile furniture that happened to serve a useful function. This suited Marcus just fine. He had always been more comfortable in the background, watching and listening rather than speaking. As he worked, Marcus couldn't help but overhear the conversations around him. His neural implants weren't as sophisticated as those worn by the diplomatic staff, but they were enough to give him basic translation capabilities. What he heard made his jaw clench. The aliens weren't just dismissive of humanity, they were actively mocking them. Council members spoke openly about the amusing little primates and their laughable attempts at civilization. Some suggested that humans might make interesting pets or servants, given their apparent eagerness to please and their lack of any real power. Marcus paused in his work as he heard Ambassador Zekthara address the chamber directly, his words translated for all species present. "Honored delegates," the insectoid being announced, his voice carrying easily through the dome's acoustic systems. "We have spent considerable time reviewing the human application for council membership. While we appreciate their enthusiasm, I believe we can all agree that they lack the basic qualifications for full participation in galactic governance." A wave of agreement swept through the chamber. Various aliens nodded, clicked, or vibrated their approval. In the human section, Dr. Chen's face remained carefully neutral, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "However," Zekthara continued, "we are not without mercy. The Council has decided to offer humanity a different role in our galactic community, one more suited to their apparent capabilities. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation systems seemed to quiet, as everyone waited for the announcement. We propose that humans serve as a client species under Council protection. They would be granted safe passage through Council space and access to certain technologies in exchange for their service in various capacities. Maintenance work, basic labor, perhaps even entertainment for our more refined species. The silence broke as laughter erupted throughout the chamber. Not the polite amusement of earlier, but open, derisive laughter that echoed off the crystal walls. Some aliens actually applauded the suggestion, clearly finding it hilarious that humanity thought they deserved equal treatment. Marcus felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. He had heard rumors that this might happen, whispered conversations among the human staff about contingency plans and backup options. But seeing it happen, hearing the casual way these beings discussed turning his entire species into servants, made him physically sick. In the human delegation, Dr. Chen rose slowly to her feet. The laughter died down as the aliens noticed her movement, curious to see how the humans would respond to their generous offer. "Ambassador Zekthara," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "On behalf of the human race, I must respectfully decline your proposal. We came here seeking partnership, not servitude." This triggered a fresh wave of amusement from the assembled delegates. The idea that humans thought they had a choice in the matter was apparently even funnier than their original application. Zekthara's mandibles clicked rapidly, the insectoid equivalent of laughter. "I fear you misunderstand the situation, Dr. Chen. This was not a negotiation. It was an offer of mercy. You may accept our generous terms, or you may find that humanity's future in this galaxy becomes considerably more difficult." The threat hung in the air like a physical thing. Marcus found his hands gripping his cleaning cart so tightly that his knuckles went white. Around the chamber he could see other human staff members frozen in place, all of them understanding exactly what was being implied. The Council had made their decision. Humanity would serve or humanity would suffer. But as Marcus looked around at the laughing aliens and the tense faces of his fellow humans, he realized something that none of these powerful beings had considered. They had spent so much time dismissing humanity as weak and primitive that they had forgotten to pay attention to what humans actually were. And what they were was very, very angry. The tension in the council chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. Dr. Chen remained standing, her face a mask of diplomatic calm, even as the alien delegates continued their cruel amusement at humanity's expense. Behind her, the other members of the human delegation sat rigid in their seats, each one processing the implications of what they had just heard. Marcus continued his cleaning routine, but every movement was mechanical now, his mind racing as he listened to the casual discussion of his species' future. The aliens spoke about humans like they were discussing livestock, debating the best uses for their new servants with the same enthusiasm they might show for a new type of household appliance. The bipedal form factor does make them suitable for certain tasks, mused Counselor Vexhai, a slug-like being whose translucent body pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They could maintain equipment in spaces too small for more evolved species. And their lack of natural weapons makes them safe to keep around, added another voice from the crowd. No claws, no venomous stingers, no psychic abilities that might pose a threat. Perfect servants, really. The laughter continued, but Marcus noticed something the aliens missed. Throughout the chamber, human staff members had stopped what they were doing. Janitors, food service workers, technical assistants, security guards, all of them had gone very still. Their faces showed the same careful neutrality that Dr. Chen displayed, but their eyes told a different story. Commander Rodriguez shifted in his seat, his military training making him hyper-aware of the changing atmosphere. He had served in 3 different wars before joining the diplomatic corps, and he recognized the feeling in the air. It was the same tension that preceded every major battle he had ever fought. In the center of the chamber, Ambassador Zekthara raised one of his forearms to quiet the crowd. "Now, Dr. Chen, I believe we should discuss the practical arrangements for your species' new role. The Council has prepared quarters for your people in the service levels of this station. Nothing fancy, of course, but adequate for your needs." Dr. Chen's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath it now. As I said, Ambassador, we cannot accept these terms. Humanity will not be enslaved regardless of how you choose to phrase it. Enslaved? Zekthara's mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. Such a harsh word. We prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. Humans provide services, and in return, they receive protection from the many dangers of galactic space. There are species out there that would view your people as nothing more than meat, Dr. Chen. We offer you so much more. The threat was clear, even wrapped in diplomatic language. Submit or face something much worse than servitude. Marcus watched as Dr. Chen's hands clenched briefly at her sides before she regained her composure. He knew that gesture. He had seen it 100 times during their journey to the council station. Whenever she received particularly bad news from Earth or faced another bureaucratic obstacle in their application process, it was the gesture of someone pushed beyond their limit but still maintaining their professional facade. I need to consult with my government, Dr. Chen said finally. This is not a decision I can make unilaterally. Of course, Zekthara replied, though his tone suggested he considered it a mere formality. You have until the next council session to provide your answer. 3 local days should be sufficient for even your primitive communication systems to reach Earth and return with instructions. The dismissal was clear. Dr. Chen bowed her head slightly, a gesture that could be interpreted as either respect or acceptance, then turned to lead her delegation from the chamber. As they walked past Marcus, he caught a glimpse of her face. The diplomatic mask had slipped for just a moment, revealing something that made him take a step back. Dr. Sarah Chen was furious. The human delegation filed out through the main exit, but Marcus and the other staff members remained to continue their duties. The alien delegates began to disperse as well, breaking into smaller groups to discuss what they had witnessed. Their conversations were animated, filled with speculation about how quickly humans would accept their new status and what tasks they might be best suited for. They breed quickly. From what I understand, one alien was saying to his companion, could be useful for expanding the workforce. I heard they have an unusual tolerance for radiation, replied another. Might be perfect for cleanup work around damaged reactors. Marcus felt his jaw muscles working as he listened, but he kept his expression blank. Around him, other human workers were having similar experiences. Janet Morrison, who ran the food service for the diplomatic quarters, stood frozen beside a serving cart as a group of delegates discussed whether humans might be tasty if properly prepared. Kevin Wu, one of the technical assistants, had gone very pale as aliens debated whether human intelligence was sufficient for complex maintenance tasks or if they should be limited to simple manual labor, but it wasn't until Marcus heard the conversation between 2 council-level aliens that he truly understood how bad things had become. The humans will resist at first, Council Prime Zerion was saying to Ambassador Zekthara as they moved toward the exit. Their species seems to have an irrational attachment to concepts like freedom and self-determination. Let them resist, Zekthara replied with obvious amusement. It will make the eventual submission more satisfying. Besides, their military is laughably primitive. A few demonstrations of superior firepower should convince them to see reason. And if they refuse to see reason, the insectoid being's mandibles clicked slowly, a sound Marcus had learned to associate with cruel pleasure. Then we will make an example of them. The galaxy has no shortage of species who need to be reminded of their place in the natural order. The 2 powerful aliens moved away, but Marcus heard enough. This wasn't just about enslaving humanity. It was about sending a message to every other species in the galaxy that defying the council had consequences. As the chamber gradually emptied, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts and his cleaning cart. The crystalline dome above reflected the artificial stars that provided light for the station, creating patterns that shifted and moved like living things. It should have been beautiful, but all Marcus could see was the prison it represented. For 6 months, he had walked through these halls as an invisible man, cleaning up after beings who considered themselves so superior that they barely acknowledged his existence. He had listened to their conversations, learned their routines, studied their technology, all while being dismissed as harmless maintenance staff. But Marcus Thompson was not just a janitor. Before taking this position, he had spent 12 years in Earth Special Forces, most of it in deep reconnaissance missions where being invisible was a matter of survival. He had volunteered for the janitorial position specifically because he knew it would give him access to areas and information that no diplomat could reach. And over the past 6 months, he had learned things that would have terrified the Council if they had been paying attention. He knew which corridors had security coverage and which were monitored only by automated systems. He knew the shift patterns of the various security forces and which species had enhanced senses that might detect human infiltrators. He knew where the critical infrastructure was located and how the station's various systems interconnected. Most importantly, he knew that there were 347 humans currently working on the Council station, and nearly all of them had military or intelligence backgrounds. The diplomatic mission had been a public effort, but Earth's governments weren't stupid. They had prepared for the possibility that diplomacy might fail. Marcus pulled out his cleaning pad and began to wipe down a nearby surface, using the motion to cover his activation of a hidden communication device embedded in his work gloves. The signal went out on a frequency that looked like routine maintenance chatter to the station's monitoring systems, but would be received by every human on the station. The message was simple, encoded in a pattern that looked like shift scheduling information. Council has decided. Servitude or destruction. Activate Protocol 7. Within minutes, similar signals began bouncing back from all over the station. Food service workers, technical staff, security personnel, cleaning crews, all acknowledging the message and confirming their readiness. The aliens thought they had cornered a species of helpless primitives. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. 3 days had passed since the Council's ultimatum, and the station buzzed with anticipation. Alien delegates moved through the corridors with the satisfied air of beings who believed they had already won. They spoke openly about the coming ceremony, where humanity would formally accept their new status, treating it like a celebration rather than the execution of an entire species' freedom. Dr. Chen had spent those 3 days in desperate communication with Earth, though the aliens monitoring her transmissions believed they were witnessing the final collapse of human resistance. What they didn't realize was that every message sent to Earth was actually a coded instruction to human operatives throughout the galaxy, activating sleeper cells that had been placed on dozens of worlds over the past several years. Marcus continued his cleaning duties, but now every movement served a dual purpose. When he polished the crystal panels in the security center, he was actually mapping the visual blind spots in the surveillance system. When he emptied waste containers in the communications hub, he was planting microscopic devices that would give humans access to the station's entire information network. When he mopped floors in the power distribution center, he was identifying the critical junctions that controlled life support for different sections of the station. The other human workers were equally busy. Janet Morrison had spent days cataloging which alien species required specialized atmospheric conditions and which could survive in standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures. Kevin Wu had been running diagnostic routines on the station's computers, ostensibly checking for efficiency problems, but actually creating backdoors that would allow human hackers to seize control of key systems. Dr. Martinez, the delegation's chief medical officer, had been studying the biological files of every major alien species, identifying weaknesses and developing countermeasures for their various natural weapons and defenses. Commander Rodriguez had been mapping the station's security protocols and identifying the locations of weapon, stockpiles and defensive positions. All of this activity was hidden beneath the routine operations of the station, invisible to aliens who had convinced themselves that humans were too primitive to pose any real threat. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ambassador Zekthara arrived at the Council chamber early, eager to witness humanity's formal capitulation. He found the Great Dome filled with delegates from across the galaxy, all gathered to watch what many considered the most amusing diplomatic development in recent memory. The human delegation entered the chamber as scheduled, with Dr. Chen leading her 20 colleagues to their designated positions in the center of the floor. They looked appropriately defeated, their heads down and their movements slow, exactly what the assembled aliens expected to see from a conquered species. "Dr. Chen," Zekthara announced from his elevated position, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. "Have you reached a decision regarding the Council's generous offer?" Dr. Chen raised her head and Marcus noticed something that the aliens missed. Her diplomatic mask was gone. replaced by an expression of calm determination that he recognized from his military days. It was the look of someone who had accepted what needed to be done and was prepared to do it. "Ambassador Zekthara," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "I have indeed consulted with my government and we have reached a unanimous decision." "Excellent," the insectoid being replied, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The Council is prepared to formalize your new status immediately. The ceremony will be broadcast throughout the galaxy, ensuring that other species understand the benefits of cooperation with the Council." "That's very thoughtful," Dr. Chen said with a slight smile that made Marcus's blood run cold. "I'm sure the galaxy will find our response very educational." Something in her tone made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats, but Zekthara was too caught up in his moment of triumph to notice. "Then please, Dr. Chen, announce humanity's decision to accept our protection and guidance." Dr. Chen straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the council members on their elevated platform. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with absolute clarity. "On behalf of the human race, I formally reject your offer of servitude. Furthermore, I hereby charge the Galactic Council with attempted genocide, slavery, and violations of every civilized standard of conduct in known space." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs and angry growls. Several council members rose to their feet, their various forms radiating outrage at the human audacity. "Dr. Chen," Zekthara's voice cut through the noise like a blade, "I fear you have misunderstood the situation. This was not a negotiation. You have no choice in this matter." "Actually," Dr. Chen replied calmly, "we do have a choice, and we choose to defend ourselves." She raised her hand and Marcus saw the small device she held up for all to see. It looked like a simple communication unit, but he knew better. It was a dead man's switch, connected to systems throughout the station that would activate the moment she released it. "You see," Dr. Chen continued, her voice now carrying to every alien in the chamber, "humans have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. While my delegation was conducting diplomatic talks, my government was preparing for the possibility that diplomacy might fail." Zekthara's four eyes fixed on the device in her hand. "What have you done?" "We've done what humans always do when threatened," she replied. "We've adapted, we've planned, and we've prepared to fight back." At that moment, every screen in the chamber lit up with tactical displays showing the interior of the station. The aliens could see human figures moving through corridors they shouldn't have access to, taking positions at critical locations throughout the complex. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various other classifications," Dr. Chen announced to the stunned chamber, "I'd like you to meet the real human delegation. 347 individuals who have spent the last 6 months learning everything there is to know about this station and your vulnerabilities." Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he heard gasps of shock from around the chamber. The aliens were finally beginning to understand that they had been played, but it was far too late to do anything about it. "Impossible," Zekthara snarled, his diplomatic composure finally cracking. "Our security would have detected any infiltration. Your people are primitives, incapable of such sophisticated operations. Your security detected exactly what we wanted it to detect," Dr. Chen replied. "Janitors, food service workers, maintenance staff, the invisible people who keep your civilization running while you congratulate yourselves on your superiority." On the screens, alien security forces were discovering that their weapons had been sabotaged, their communication systems were jammed, and their command structure had been systematically compromised. Humans appeared to be everywhere at once, moving with military precision through areas that should have been impossible for them to access. "But how?" one of the council members demanded, a being of crystalline formation whose voice rang like breaking glass. "We monitored all your communications, tracked every movement of your delegation members." "You monitored the communications you knew about," Dr. Chen corrected. "You tracked the people you thought mattered, but you never paid attention to the servants, the workers, the invisible humans who cleaned your messes and served your food. Because to you we were just background noise, barely worth noticing." Marcus felt a surge of grim satisfaction as the reality of the situation sank in throughout the chamber. The most powerful beings in the galaxy had been outwitted by the species they considered too primitive to matter. "You made one critical mistake," Dr. Chen continued, her voice growing harder with each word. "You underestimated us. You saw our lack of claws and fangs and psychic powers and assumed we were weak. But humans don't need natural weapons, because we're very good at making our own. The display shifted to show the station's power grid, life support systems and defensive networks, all now under human control. Red warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, as the aliens realized that their supposedly impregnable fortress had been turned into a trap. "So here's our counteroffer," Dr. Chen said, still holding the dead man's switch steady in her raised hand. "The Council will formally recognize humanity as an equal species with full membership rights. You will abandon any plans for enslaving or threatening human worlds, and you will issue a public apology for your conduct during these negotiations." "And if we refuse?" Zekthara demanded, though his voice had lost much of its earlier arrogance. Dr. Chen's smile turned cold as winter on Earth's polar ice caps. "Then you'll discover that humans have one more trait you failed to consider. When cornered, we don't surrender. We fight back with everything we have, and we make sure that everyone who threatens us pays a price they'll never forget." The chamber fell silent except for the continued sound of alarms as the full implications of humanity's trap became clear. The servants had become the masters, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence in the council chamber stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Ambassador Zekthara's four eyes darted between Dr. Chen's steady gaze and the tactical displays showing humans in control of critical systems throughout the station. The insectoid being's mandibles clicked rapidly, but no sound emerged. For perhaps the first time in his long diplomatic career, he was speechless. Around the chamber, alien delegates watched the screens with growing horror as they realized the extent of the human infiltration. What they had dismissed as harmless service, workers had systematically taken control of everything that kept them alive in the vacuum of space. Marcus allowed himself a moment of professional satisfaction as he watched the aliens' confidence crumble. He had trained for operations like this his entire military career, but he had never imagined executing one on such a scale. 347 human operatives had infiltrated the most secure facility in known space, and their targets hadn't even noticed until it was too late. "This is madness," Council Prime Zarian finally managed, his energy form flickering with what might have been fear. "You cannot seriously threaten the entire Galactic Council. The consequences would be catastrophic for your entire species." Dr. Chen tilted her head slightly, considering the statement. "You're absolutely right about the consequences being catastrophic, but I think you're confused about who's going to suffer them." She gestured toward the screens where new displays were appearing. These showed star charts marking human positions throughout the galaxy, and the aliens began to understand that the station infiltration was just the beginning. "While my diplomatic team was here being insulted and threatened," Dr. Chen continued, "human ships were taking positions in 12 different star systems. Each one contains a major council world or strategic installation. Each one is carrying weapons that your species have never seen before." "Impossible," growled Counselor Vexhai, his slug-like body pulsing with agitated bioluminescence. "Our sensors would have detected any military buildup. Your ships are centuries behind our technology." "Our visible ships, yes," Dr. Chen agreed. "But you see, humans have been studying your technology for much longer than you realize. Every piece of equipment you've sold us, every data file you've shared, every casual conversation with our diplomats has taught us something new about how your society works." The displays shifted again, showing reconnaissance footage of Council military installations. The images were clearly taken from inside secure facilities, filmed by beings who had access to areas no outsider should have been able to reach. "We've been placing operatives throughout Council space for the past 5 years," Dr. Chen explained as the aliens stared at footage of their most secret weapons programs. "Not soldiers or spies, but workers. Humans are very good at looking harmless and helpful, while we learn everything there is to know about our potential enemies." Marcus thought about the hundreds of humans scattered across the galaxy, all posing as harmless immigrants or temporary workers, while they gathered intelligence and positioned themselves for operations like this one. It had been the largest intelligence operation in human history, and its success was now becoming clear. "You still don't understand," Zekthara said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Even if you have infiltrated our facilities, you cannot seriously threaten species with technology thousands of years more advanced than your own." "Advanced?" Dr. Chen laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. "Your technology is certainly more sophisticated than ours, but advanced? I don't think so. She nodded toward Marcus, who pulled a small device from his cleaning cart. To alien eyes, it looked like a standard maintenance tool, but Marcus's modifications had turned it into something much more dangerous. Your species have spent millennia perfecting technologies that make your lives easier and more comfortable, Dr. Chen explained. Humans have spent our entire history perfecting technologies that kill our enemies more efficiently. Marcus activated the device, and immediately several of the aliens in the chamber began to show signs of distress. Their various biological systems started to malfunction as the device emitted frequencies specifically tuned to disrupt their neural and respiratory functions. "What are you doing to us?" Zerion demanded, his energy form beginning to fluctuate wildly. "Demonstrating a fundamental difference in our approaches to technology," Dr. Chen replied calmly. "When you encountered a new species, you studied their culture and their science to see how you could incorporate them into your civilization. When humans encounter a new species, we study their biology and their weaknesses to see how we could defeat them if necessary." Marcus turned off the device, and the affected aliens slowly recovered. But the demonstration had made its point. Every being in the chamber now understood that the humans had been studying them with very different intentions than anyone had realized. "The device my colleague just used is specifically calibrated for this chamber and the species present," Dr. Chen continued. "Every human on this station carries similar tools, each one designed to neutralize the particular aliens they work around. We've been mapping your biological vulnerabilities for 6 months. The tactical displays updated again, showing detailed schematics of alien anatomies with critical points highlighted in red. Pressure points, neural clusters, respiratory weak spots, all mapped with medical precision." "This is barbaric," one of the council members protested. A plant-like being whose leaves had turned a sickly yellow color. "Civilized species don't study each other as potential targets for assassination. Civilized species also don't enslave entire races or threaten genocide when their diplomatic proposals are rejected," Dr. Chen shot back. "You started this conflict the moment you decided that humans weren't worthy of basic respect." Around the chamber, other human staff members had emerged from their positions and were taking up strategic locations. They moved with military precision, their earlier subservient demeanor replaced by the focused confidence of trained soldiers. Janet Morrison had shed her food service uniform to reveal body armor and weapons designed specifically for close-quarters combat with multiple alien species. Kevin Wu's technical gear had been reconfigured into sophisticated jamming and hacking equipment. Every human on the station had transformed from harmless worker to dangerous operative. "But surely you must realize," Zekthara said desperately, "that even if you control this station, the council fleets will respond. You cannot fight the entire galaxy." "We don't need to fight the entire galaxy," Dr. Chen replied. "We only need to fight the parts of it that threaten us, and we've prepared for that possibility." The displays shifted to show deep space, where sleek ships that bore no resemblance to known human designs were decloaking around council vessels. The alien fleet commanders had been confident in their superiority right up until the moment they discovered they were surrounded. "Stealth technology," Dr. Chen explained as the aliens watched their supposedly undetectable warships being tracked and targeted by invisible enemies. "Another area where humans have made some interesting advances. You see, when you spend centuries fighting wars on a single planet, you get very good at hiding from enemies who are looking for you." "How many ships?" Counselor Vexhai asked, his bioluminescent patterns now cycling through what Marcus recognized as fear responses. "Enough," Dr. Chen said simply. "The question isn't whether we can hurt you. The question is how much damage you're willing to accept before you agree to treat us as equals." The chamber fell silent again as the aliens processed the implications. They had expected to face a primitive species that would submit to superior force. Instead, they had discovered that they were facing an enemy that had spent months preparing for war while pretending to seek peace. "You cannot be serious about this," Zekthara said finally. "You would risk interstellar war over a matter of diplomatic protocol?" Dr. Chen's expression hardened. "Ambassador, you offered my species a choice between slavery and extinction. Did you really think we would choose either one?" The alien's mandibles clicked nervously as he realized that his carefully planned demonstration of council power had become something entirely different. The humans weren't begging for mercy or accepting their fate. They were dictating terms from a position of strength. "So what happens now?" he asked. his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Now you get to make a choice, Ambassador. You can accept our terms and begin treating humanity as an equal partner in galactic civilization. Or you can refuse and discover exactly how much damage a primitive species can do when you threaten their freedom. The dead man's switch remained steady in her hand, and Marcus knew that every alien in the chamber was calculating the odds of their survival if the situation escalated further. For the first time since humanity had arrived at the council station, the aliens were the ones who looked afraid. The council chamber had become a pressure cooker of tension and barely controlled panic. Ambassador Zekthara stood frozen at his podium, his four eyes darting between Dr. Chen's unwavering gaze and the tactical displays that showed human forces in position throughout the galaxy. Around him, his fellow council members whispered urgently in their native languages, their various forms of communication creating a chaotic symphony of fear and confusion. Marcus maintained his position near the chamber's edge, but his role as invisible janitor was long past. Now he stood alert and ready, his modified cleaning equipment serving as both weapons and communication tools. Around the chamber, his fellow operatives had taken similar positions, creating a human perimeter that effectively controlled every exit and strategic point in the massive dome. "This is unprecedented," muttered Council Prime Zerion, his energy form fluctuating with rapid pulses that indicated extreme agitation. No species has ever dared to threaten the Council directly. The implications of allowing such behavior could destabilize the entire galactic order. The galactic order was already destabilized the moment you decided to enslave an entire species. Dr. Chen replied coldly, "We're just making sure you understand the consequences of that decision." Counselor Vexhigh's slug-like body had turned a deep purple, a color that Marcus had learned indicated extreme stress among his species. "Dr. Chen, surely we can find a compromise that doesn't involve threats of violence. The Council has always been willing to negotiate in good faith." The human diplomat's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Good faith? You spent 3 days planning a ceremony to celebrate humanity's enslavement. You discussed using my people as radiation cleanup crews and debated whether we might be edible. That's your definition of good faith?" Around the chamber, other alien delegates were beginning to realize that their private conversations had not been as private as they had believed. Several species known for their telepathic abilities were frantically trying to scan the humans for surface thoughts, only to discover that the humans' neural implants included sophisticated psi-shielding technology. "You've been listening to our private communications," Zekthara accused, his diplomatic training finally reasserting itself as he tried to regain some measure of control over the situation. "Every word," Marcus confirmed, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. His voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, and several aliens turned to stare at him in surprise. "Did you really think we would come to a diplomatic negotiation without intelligence-gathering capabilities? But you're just maintenance staff," protested one of the delegates, a crystalline being whose faceted form was refracting light in patterns that suggested confusion. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, Earth Special Forces Reconnaissance Division," Marcus replied, allowing his military bearing to show for the first time in months. "I've been conducting deep infiltration operations for 12 years, and this has been the most target-rich environment I've ever encountered." The revelation that their invisible janitor was actually a high-ranking military officer sent ripples of shock through the alien assembly. If they had been wrong about something so basic, what else had they missed? Dr. Chen used their confusion to press her advantage. "Every human on this station has a similar background. We didn't send diplomats and support staff to the most important negotiation in human history. We sent our best intelligence operatives and special forces personnel, and we gave them 6 months to learn everything about you that we could possibly discover." The tactical displays updated again, showing detailed profiles of every major council species. Biological weaknesses, technological vulnerabilities, political divisions, economic dependencies, all laid out with the thoroughness of a military intelligence assessment. "This is why your offer of servitude was so insulting," Dr. Chen continued. "You looked at us and saw primitives who could be easily controlled. We looked at you and saw potential enemies who needed to be thoroughly understood before we decided how dangerous you really were. Zekathara's mandibles clicked rapidly as he processed the implications. How long have you been planning this operation? Since the moment we received your invitation to join the council, Dr. Chen replied. Human governments learned long ago that when someone invites you to a negotiation, you should be prepared for the possibility that they're actually inviting you to a trap. Marcus remembered the briefings back on Earth, where military and intelligence leaders had outlined the mission parameters. Everyone had hoped that diplomacy would succeed, but no one had been naive enough to assume it would. Humans had been preparing for this confrontation since their first contact with galactic civilization. The irony, Dr. Chen said, is that we actually came here hoping for genuine partnership. Humanity has always believed that diversity makes us stronger, and we were excited about the possibility of joining a galactic community. But you made it clear that you were only interested in our submission. Perhaps we were hasty in our assessment, Zerion said carefully, his energy form stabilizing as he tried to project calm. The Council might be willing to reconsider humanity's application for full membership. Might be. Dr. Chen's voice carried a dangerous edge. Ambassador, I think you're still not grasping the situation. This isn't a negotiation anymore. This is you accepting our terms or facing the consequences of your actions. She gestured toward the displays, which now showed human ships positioned throughout Council space. The aliens could see that their most important worlds were all within range of weapons they didn't fully understand. Every major Council facility is currently targeted by human forces, Dr. Chen explained. Your military installations, your government centers, your primary industrial complexes. We've spent months identifying the critical points that keep your civilization running. But surely you wouldn't actually attack civilian populations, protested another council member, a bird-like being whose feathers had turned pale with fear. Of course not, Dr. Chen replied. Unlike some species, humans don't target non-combatants. But your military and government facilities? Those are absolutely fair game if you choose to continue threatening us. Marcus watched as the aliens absorbed this information. They were finally beginning to understand that they were dealing with a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history fighting wars and surviving threats. Humans might lack natural weapons, but they had become very good at making artificial ones. What exactly are your terms? Zekathara asked finally, his voice resigned. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly, but her grip on the dead man's switch remained steady. Full council membership for humanity, with all the rights and privileges that entails. Formal apologies for the threats made during these negotiations, and a complete revision of the Council's policies regarding the treatment of newly contacted species. That last point is non-negotiable, she added when several aliens began to object. What you tried to do to us, you've probably done to others. That ends now. And if we agree to these terms? Zerion asked. Then humanity becomes a loyal and valuable member of the galactic community, Dr. Chen replied. We're very good allies to those who treat us with respect. Ask the Centauri delegation about our technology sharing agreements, or the Rigel Collective about our joint defense treaties. The mention of humanity's existing relationships with other species caused another stir among the aliens. They had assumed that Earth was isolated and friendless, but apparently that was yet another miscalculation. How long do we have to consider your terms? Zekathara asked. Dr. Chen checked her chronometer. You have until the end of this session to provide an answer. After that, my colleagues throughout the galaxy will assume that negotiations have failed and will act accordingly. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over the assembled delegates. They had entered this session expecting to witness humanity's submission. Instead, they were facing an ultimatum from a species they had drastically underestimated. Marcus could see the fear in their alien faces, but also something else, a grudging respect. The humans had outplayed them completely, turning their own arrogance against them and demonstrating capabilities that no one had suspected. Very well, Zekathara said at last. The council will vote, but everyone in the chamber already knew what that vote would be. When faced with the choice between accepting human equality or facing a war they weren't prepared for, the decision was obvious. The age of human servitude was over before it had ever truly begun. The age of human partnership in galactic civilization was about to commence. The vote was unanimous, not because the council members were convinced of humanity's righteousness, but because they were intelligent enough to recognize when they had been completely outmaneuvered. One by one, the alien delegates cast their votes in favor of full human membership, each announcement echoing through the chamber with the weight of historical inevitability. Ambassador Zekthara's voice was steady, but noticeably subdued as he made the formal announcement. By unanimous decision of the Galactic Council, humanity is hereby granted full membership status with all associated rights and privileges. The Council also formally apologizes for any misunderstandings that may have occurred during the negotiation process. Dr. Chen finally lowered the dead man's switch, but Marcus noticed that she kept it within easy reach. Trust would have to be earned over time, and humans had long memories when it came to species that had threatened their freedom. "Thank you, Ambassador," Dr. Chen replied with diplomatic courtesy that somehow managed to contain an undertone of iron. Humanity looks forward to a long and productive partnership with the galactic community. Around the chamber, alien delegates were beginning to process what had just happened. They had witnessed the most dramatic reversal in Council history. Watching a species they had dismissed as primitive completely reshape the balance of galactic power in a single afternoon. Marcus allowed himself a small smile as he began to pack away his cleaning equipment. The tools that had hidden some of humanity's most sophisticated technology for 6 months were no longer needed. His role as an invisible janitor was officially over, though he suspected that the intelligence gathered during this operation would be valuable for years to come. "There is one more matter to address," Dr. Chen announced as the initial shock of the vote began to wear off. "The Council's policies regarding newly contacted species must be formally revised to prevent future incidents like this one." Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. The implications of Dr. Chen's statement were clear. Humanity knew about other species that had been forced into servitude or worse, and those situations would need to be addressed. "The vegan mining colonies," Dr. Chen said, reading from a data pad that had materialized from her diplomatic case. "The Alteran agricultural settlements, the Proximan technical support networks, all established under what the Council termed protective agreements, but which appear to be indentured servitude by any reasonable definition." The aliens in the chamber grew very quiet. These were not matters that were supposed to be discussed in public sessions, and the fact that humans had discovered them indicated a level of intelligence penetration that no one had suspected. Those arrangements were established for the protection of the species involved. Zirion protested, but his energy form flickered with what Marcus had learned to recognize as uncertainty. "Protection from whom?" Dr. Chen asked pointedly. "Because our analysis suggests that the primary threat to these species was the Council itself." She activated a holographic display that showed detailed economic data flowing between Council worlds and the supposedly protected species. The numbers told a clear story of exploitation disguised as benevolence. The Vegans mine rare elements that are essential to Council technology, but they receive compensation that amounts to less than 1% of the market value. Dr. Chen explained. The Alterans produce agricultural products that feed half the core worlds, but their people are malnourished because most of their crops are shipped off-world. The Proximans maintain the technical infrastructure for dozens of advanced species, but they're denied access to the very technologies they service. Each revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Council's carefully constructed narrative of benevolent guidance was being systematically dismantled by someone who had clearly done her homework. "These arrangements will be renegotiated," Dr. Chen continued, "with human observers present to ensure fair treatment. Any species that wishes to withdraw from Council protection will be free to do so, and humanity will guarantee their independence. You cannot simply restructure thousands of years of established relationships," protested Councillor Vexhai, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through agitated configurations. "Watch us," Dr. Chen replied with a smile that made Marcus proud to be human. "We're very good at restructuring unfair systems. It's something of a specialty of ours." The tactical displays updated one final time, showing human ships moving to positions around the worlds Dr. Chen had mentioned. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just negotiating for its own freedom, but for the freedom of every species that had been trapped in the Council's web of exploitation. Zekthara sagged in his chair, the full scope of the human operation finally becoming clear to him. How long have you been planning all of this? Since our first contact with galactic civilization, Dr. Chen admitted. Human history is full of examples of what happens when technologically advanced societies encounter less developed ones. The outcomes are rarely good for the less developed society, unless they're prepared to defend themselves. Marcus thought about the centuries of preparation that had led to this moment. Humanity's first contact with aliens had triggered the largest mobilization effort in human history, but it had been conducted in absolute secrecy to avoid alarming the very species they were preparing to defend against. We learned from our own past, Dr. Chen continued. European colonization of the Americas, the partition of Africa, the exploitation of indigenous peoples throughout human history. We knew that advanced civilizations don't always have the best interests of less advanced ones at heart. So we prepared, Marcus added, finally stepping forward to stand beside his diplomatic colleagues. We studied your technologies, learned your languages, mapped your societies, and positioned ourselves to respond if you proved to be a threat. And when you offered us slavery, Dr. Chen concluded, you proved that our preparations were justified. The chamber was silent for a long moment as the aliens contemplated the implications of what they had learned. Humanity wasn't just another primitive species to be absorbed into the Council's hierarchy. They were potentially the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever encountered, because they combined advanced intelligence with the hard-won knowledge of how to resist domination. What happens now? Zekthara asked finally. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly, showing the first genuine warmth she had displayed since the confrontation began. Now we work together to build a better galactic community, one based on genuine partnership rather than domination. She gestured toward the humans positioned around the chamber, who were beginning to stand down from their combat positions. We didn't come here looking for a fight, Ambassador. We came looking for friends and allies. You forced us to demonstrate our defensive capabilities, but we'd much rather use our skills for construction than destruction. Humanity has technologies and perspectives that could benefit every species in the galaxy, she continued. We're willing to share them freely with partners who treat us as equals. The choice of whether you want to be partners or enemies is entirely up to you. Marcus began pushing his cleaning cart toward the exit, but now it was clearly a symbolic gesture rather than a genuine work duty. The invisible janitor was leaving, but Lieutenant Colonel Thompson would return as an official representative of humanity's interests. Oh, and Ambassador? Dr. Chen called out as the human delegation prepared to leave. You might want to review your security procedures. It turns out that paying attention to the people who clean your floors and serve your food is actually quite important. As the humans filed out of the chamber, Marcus could hear the aliens beginning to discuss what had just happened. Some were angry, others were frightened, but many seemed genuinely intrigued by the possibilities that humanity represented. The galaxy had just learned that humans were not the primitive servants they appeared to be. They were partners who demanded respect, allies who valued freedom, and enemies who could not be safely ignored. It was, Marcus reflected as he walked through the corridors he had cleaned for 6 months, exactly the outcome humanity had been working toward all along. They had come to the stars not as conquerors or servants, but as equals, who were prepared to defend that equality with everything they had. The janitor had put away his mop, and the galaxy would never be the same.